Chakravorty, please come on stage. Bring Shamid Banerjee of Condorcet and Michael Froman of MasterCard. This is a very eminent panel we've got here. Bhaskar helped us put this together. It was his idea. He's the Dean of Global Business at the wait, what's the school named?
Fletcher School.
The Fletcher School at Tufts. And he's going to take it away. I'm so pleased and honored at the quality of this panel.
Great. Thank you, David. And just yesterday, when I was hanging out in the lobby, people were squinting and looking at my tag. They were asking, so Fletcher School, that's like a foreign policy school, and what are you doing at Techonomy? And I kind of said, data moves across borders faster than Air Force One or intercontinental ballistic missiles. And because data moves so fast, often the coders at Facebook or Twitter or Google don't have to cross borders. They sit in their beautiful offices and they code, and their code goes all over the world. So there is a need for global affairs to be combined with technology in a conversation. Artificial intelligence needs to connect with contextual intelligence. And I know that we are standing between you and cocktails, so I thought I'd lead off with the perfect visual to get us going on a cocktail conversation. So with that, there you go. I'm, a humble academic, and you get an x-axis and a y-axis. And so here's my job. My job is much like a medieval map maker. With the medieval map makers, they kind of, charted a few parts of the world, and wherever they couldn't quite figure out whether there was a landmass or not, they scribbled, "Here there be dragons." And I feel we're kind of at that stage, where we are at the here there be dragon stage as we are mapping the digital planet. And I do this in collaboration with a number of partners in the corporate sector and the philanthropic sector. We've done some amazing work, I think, in collaboration with MasterCard in mapping the digital planet. And here's what it looks like. So this is a picture that shows 60 countries around the world that account for about 85% of all the data that's generated. The vertical axis measures where a country is in its journey from a physical past to a digital future. This is measured using an index called the Digital Evolution Index. So as you go from south to north, the more digitally evolved you are. The horizontal direction is momentum, how quickly you're moving, okay? So you can see that the world actually splits up into kind of 4 convenient areas. And the bottom part of this map is what I call the digital south. And the digital south is a part of the world that I'm hoping that in this session we shine a light on because it's important. It's big. It's huge. It's something that we have alluded to. We talked about glancingly over the course of the last several sessions, but we really not dived into it. It's huge because if I were to put people on that map, you can see the bottom right corner of that map is where the digital evolution has not quite reached its full potential. Momentum is fast, momentum is high. The world's population is loaded on the bottom right of that map. This entire graph will just tilt to the left. And you can see that's where all the action is. That's where all the action is going to be. So it's big, it's important. Second, it's different from the digital north. This is not the digital north 10 years late. This is a part of the world that is going to travel, go down its own path, follow its own journey. This is not simply Facebook, being the medium that carries messages in different parts of the world, and only now we're beginning to realize some of the damage that Facebook might have done in countries like Myanmar. It's not Facebook anymore. That's the major medium. It's WhatsApp, which is very different. WhatsApp is the medium of choice in large parts of the digital south. WhatsApp is encrypted from end to end. There are pernicious, poisonous messages that are being spread on WhatsApp. And still, here in Silicon Valley or in Washington, D.C., we're still having a conversation about Facebook. we're still having a conversation about Facebook. So the Digital South needs to be recognized for what it is. It's different. And finally, it carries not just risks, it carries opportunities. This is a part of the world that is hungry for development, is hungry for growth. The costs of developing across this entire region, both in terms of sustainability and economic development, the costs could be anywhere between $3 to $5 trillion a year. The commercial value associated with that development, if companies were to lean in and participate in the development, is anywhere from $12 to $15 trillion of commercial value. And in any given sector, for instance, the application of artificial intelligence in agriculture, as an example, we've calculated to be $250 billion a year. So there's an enormous amount of potential here. So artificial intelligence needs to connect with contextual intelligence, or the Digital South. And this session, I want to spend some time getting into that part of the world. And I can't think of two better people to help us navigate through this territory. So to my immediate right, Mike Froman, who is Vice Chairman of MasterCard and Chairman of the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. And having gone there just after having served on the cabinet of the Obama administration. And so he knows both government and industry quite intimately. Sumit Banerjee, who's on the board of directors of Jio, Reliance Jio. How many people in this room know of Jio? Okay. How many of you know the spelling of Jio? It's J-I-O, which means live. This is an upstart a mobile data company that is little over 2 years old, has 200 million people already on it. By 2020, it'll have 400 million people. So let's get the story from the ground up from Sumit on how this incredible network that can carry this opportunity in one territory and get a granular understanding of that. Then we'll turn to Mike and learn about how a global company might look at that space and how it sees the opportunities for engaging in inclusive growth and commercial opportunity. So Sumit, tell us a little bit about Jio.
So thank you, Bhaskar. So Reliance is a large company in India. It is primarily known as a hydrocarbons company. It's India's largest market cap company today. Some years ago, 5-6 years ago, the way that Mukesh Ambani, the chairman, managing director of the company, tells the story. His daughter came back from college in the States and said, "Dad, the internet at home really sucks." When my son says that, I don't have a ready solution to it. In his case, the way he tells the story, he decided to build Jio. Jio is, if you look, we went commercial in September 2 years ago. And just to give you some sense of the scale of it, the mission from the start was about, as he put it, connecting everyone, everything, everywhere, at the highest quality and the most affordable price. How is that done? This is an all-IP 4G LTE network. It has no circuit switch fallback. Today, there are over 200,000 radiating eNodeB base stations across the country. Over 250,000 kilometers of fiber for the backhaul. Today's population coverage is 93% of India's population. To put that in context, what this is really saying is that 93% of the continent is within reach of a high-speed mobile broadband connection. If you look at any developing country, you don't get numbers anywhere near that. You don't get numbers near that here or in the UK. So I'm deeply concerned about the Digital South. I'm concerned about the Digital Southeast of England. I'm concerned about the Digital South of the United States. The reality is, news to politicians, you cannot be a digital superpower if your people are not connected. And so the core idea of Jio is to bring an all-data idea to a continent. We have 252 million subs as declared in after the last board meeting. We're adding about 10 million a month. Last quarter, we added 42 million subs, gross adds. What is astonishing is that in these 2 years, this has gone to being by far the world's largest mobile data network. Jio carried 2.7 exabytes of data last month. That's 2.5 times the size of the entire mobile data market in the US. So that's 2.5 times larger. You've got to remember that there's a huge fixed broadband infrastructure in this country that carries a lot of data. It's 5 times China. Users are using right now 11 gig per month. 2.5 years ago, India was 0.15 gig per user per month. So it is a radical transformation. I'm happy to get into a bit more of the detail if you'd like later, but it's been one of the most astonishing things I've had the privilege of being involved in.
Wow. So that is the largest mobile network company that most people in this room haven't heard of, but now you do. So as you listen to this, Mike, and you're part of this massive global organization, priceless, MasterCard. And MasterCard has committed $500 million, $500 million for inclusive growth as part of its strategic objectives and vision. Right. As you listen to just this one market and the opportunity that this market provides in terms of this incredible access that technology enables, how do you see your vision for inclusive growth playing out, not just in this market, but worldwide?
Well, first, let me respond by putting it in context, as you said. On one hand, we're meeting at a time when there's been incredibly impressive growth on all dimensions, raising people out of poverty. All the human development indexes over the last 70 years have enjoyed unprecedented success. And yet, there's been a reaction here in the United States and elsewhere around the world that the system isn't necessarily working for everybody. We see a rise of populism and nationalism and nativism and protectionism. And that's, I think, in some degree, a sense that the growth has not been sufficiently inclusive. Mm-hmm. So we're very much committed to inclusive growth. And I think we have to take both of those terms on equal footing. We have to focus on growth, which has been the big driver of all these improvements, but make sure going forward it's more inclusive than ever. And at a time when governments have been polarized and somewhat paralyzed from taking action, there's a much greater burden, I think, and opportunity on the private sector to step up and try and fill the void. And so the story of Jio, I think, is a great story in that regard. What is it that companies are supposed to do in this context? You know, I think there's philanthropy, which in my view is doing well and helping other people do good. There's doing well and doing good, and we call that corporate social responsibility, or ESG, how much energy you use, how you govern yourself, how you treat your employees. But the ultimate goal is to do well by doing good and show that you can have a positive social and economic impact while delivering commercially sustainable results, like Jio is doing here. It's going to make a profit off this, maybe not as much as Ambani would have made in some of his other investments, but he's showing that it could be done on a commercially sustainable basis. That's, I think, the very important step going forward. What we're doing in that regard, we're focusing on inclusive growth, on economic development, and on the future of work. And on inclusive growth, or excuse me, financial inclusion, which is a big part of it, it's about bringing 500 million individuals into the financial system, 40 million new micro merchants into the financial system by linking them with networks that can help enhance their productivity. So whether that's in individual's case by digitalizing the relationship between low-wage workers in labor-intensive industries like the garment sector or a certain farming sector, or in the case of small and micro businesses, digitalizing the relationship between a micro merchant, you know, the stall at the end of a road in Nairobi, with Unilever, its supplier of goods, so that a bank can begin to extend credit, can begin to see a P&L for that business and begin to create a credit history for that business. We're bringing them into the financial system, creating the opportunity for those people, those strivers, those people most likely to grow their business and hire more people to have that opportunity.
So if I could just pick up on that last set of points. If you think about just a country like India, where there are more phones than toilets, and you know, Bill Gates has just launched this initiative to try and close that gap. But the fact that you know, now the number of phones and broadband-enabled phones are just going to continue to grow. One of the initiatives that is central to the inclusive growth vision for MasterCard is data and the generation and use of data as as a force multiplier, as a force for inclusion. Could you speak a little bit about how you see data as being an empowering tool?
Well, a couple comments. One is, I think you've talked about the South, the digital South. I would focus a bit more on another kind of divide, which is between the data haves and the data have-nots. You take the people in this room and the private sector generally, and the incredible data resources and capabilities that the private sector has. And on the other hand, you take the public sector, governments, or the nonprofit social sector, who are falling further and further behind in terms of their ability to use their own data, to access additional data, and to have the same kind of impact that the private sector is having. Some of the panels earlier today were talking about how do you deal, for example, with city governments on transportation, making sure that your counterparts can actually take the data that you have and the tools that you have and have a positive impact. To me, that's something that the private sector needs to be quite attuned to, working with governments, working with the social sector to try and bridge that divide so that they also can take advantage of this data revolution. But certainly we feel like, and we're fortunate because the design of the way our business model works, it's privacy by design. When you use your card, we don't know your name, we don't know what it is you buy, we just know where money was spent and when, and we can use that data to help give insights to governments or others about what kind of impact various economic development policies might have. Should you put a retail establishment in this neighborhood? Should you extend a transportation line to this neighborhood? Can you manage congestion better during rush hour traffic by using our spend data and our information? And using those kinds of capabilities to help solve major societal and economic issues. That's part of what we see as doing in terms of what we call doing well by doing good.
So now, Sumit, you guys have got this incredible data network in place. What kinds of different services are being layered on top of that? And what kinds of data are going to be generated by it?
Well, let me connect this to the inclusion point, which is that I think that where this investment becomes interesting is that the published aim of the company is to have high-speed mobile broadband services accessible to 99% of the population. And you remember that this is a country with very high mountains and seas and oceans and islands, and so it's not straightforward to get to that number. And the reason most carriers don't do that is because beyond the 60th or the 70th percent of the population, it just gets very, very expensive on that last mile problem. So that's the kind of philanthropy aspect of this thing, which is the commitment to bring India into a digital and data future. Now, there's a second barrier to getting into this game, which is that the device, all of you have in your pockets and so on, is a $1,000 device. And there are cheaper versions of them, but those are still $200 devices. And these are people living on $1 a day. So there's a big set of innovations around device, and there is an image if you're able to show it.
Can we pull the image up?
If we can, yeah. So the big innovation here is this device known as a JioPhone, which I'll show you in a minute. 500 million people in the country use an old-fashioned Nokia-style feature phone. And what the JioPhone does is make that available to all of those users. It's a full 4G LTE device. It operates on a open source but proprietary 2Geo operating system and gives you access to the internet. And so we have in rural India a very interesting inversion, which is most people would expect, if you conventionally think about a business, that you have an 80-20 rule, that the top 10 metros or the top 20 cities in the country account for 80% of the data. Not true. The top 10 urban areas of India account for only 22% of the data traffic on the Jio network. So rural users are actually using, if you index it up and account for the fact that these devices, which we aren't being able to get up, anyway, it looks like a feature phone, and it isn't. These devices give people access, and we asked someone recently whether this was their first phone, and she said, it's my first camera, my first radio, my first television, my first bank account. And that is the power of unleashing digital inclusion in places where there has been nothing. So these are people who have been completely dark. They've not been anywhere near anything, and access. So it's really exciting, and there are 2 or 3 areas of this sort. I think that in rural India, penetration is rising extremely fast. The device is an astonishing success. What people are doing with it is kind of interesting, which is it's certainly the biggest digital experiment I could ever have been involved in. And you wonder, what do people do with this? Here it is. So the one on the left is our first one, JioPhone 1. That one you get for free. And the way it works is that you pay a deposit of 1,500 rupees, which is about $20. And in 3 years' time, if you return the phone in whatever condition, you get the money back. No questions asked. We dropped that to 500 rupees last quarter because even at 1,500, there were barriers to uptake. The one on the right, as you can see, looks a bit like a BlackBerry, but has a full QWERTY keyboard and gives you, again, access to. By the way, this also comes with search, browser, so on and so forth. WhatsApp, super important, more important than Facebook in that market. So, I think what we've learned is that people watch a hell of a lot of video. And, you might think, well, what kind of video? Well, it's kind of interesting. There's a huge amount of traffic looking at educational video, like people teaching themselves stuff on the internet. And so it is.
It's not just porn.
Oh, no, well, maybe it is, but I'm sure there's some of that, just as anywhere else on the human race. But there is an enormous amount of curiosity. And in a country without, and I'm happy to talk about healthcare and education if you'd like to, but it is astonishing how fast it is moving. It's interesting that the average user is using 11 gig a month. Rural users are using 8 gig a month on a device, as you can see, much smaller screen, much lower resolution, therefore much lower bit rate, than your fancy smartphones.
So you mentioned WhatsApp, and I'd like to sort of come back to the notion of here there be dragons. So you have this woman that you mentioned, for whom this was the first phone, television, book, and everything else.
Yep.
So you go from basically no exposure to this Swiss Army knife of communications and potentially banking in your hands. WhatsApp carries rumors that are quite often unverifiable, and it is leading to some pernicious behaviors. Using the phone for financial services, there is a concern about data protection, privacy protections. How do you deal with these kinds of issues in a society that has suddenly got this technology almost overnight? And it's not just technology from the south of London. This is technology far more powerful than the access that you have in South London. So I guess a question for each one of you.
You want to do the pernicious, and I'll take the virtuous, or?
Well, look, I think that there's been more than ample discussion at this conference about all of the kind of downsides and what's happening with that. And that comes with the territory, in my view. But I absolutely believe that this technology is transformative for India. And that if you look at simply, just take the banking question, right? You have a variety of welfare schemes for poorer people, which today are paid out to them essentially in cash, because there's 600,000 villages, there's a bank near perhaps 100,000. So to have a bank account is difficult, so it's a cash transaction. And as you might imagine, there are two ways to make money, and one of them is to rip off $1 from every poor person in the country. Makes you $1 billion. It's not bad, right? So that's kind of, now, if you can the finance minister can hit a red button on the 31st of the month, and your account automatically credits for 1,200 rupees for your, whatever it is, minimum income guarantee, all that's gone. And if I could transact with it. So I think that, yes, there are downsides to these things. I also think that it is important to not overdo the metropolitan condescension of poor, uneducated people. They understand technology very quickly. They understand I think that the level of sophistication and understanding what is true, false, and what is used, by the way, in a pernicious way by people who wish to, is quite well understood.
I think, just to build on that, I think there's a great opportunity to really focus on the digitalization of the base of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. You've done great work on the cost of cash, but being able to bring people into the financial system, whether it's as farmers, as micro merchants, as a mother getting her children vaccinated, as a parent paying for education fees, or as somebody getting, a refugee getting a disbursement from an aid organization or a subsidy from the government, having a digital identity, a common data layer that the various organizations that engage with them can see and analyze, creates a real opportunity for people to begin to build their digital life in a way that is much more safe and secure. Lots of apocryphal stories about, you move people from cash to electronic payroll, suddenly they think they got a 25% raise just because that was the amount that was being skimmed off by all the people along the way. That's the kind of benefit that we begin to see. And it's access, which is the first step towards financial security and financial health. Financial access is only one step, but it's the first important step. And then you begin to build a future, as you say, that they're incredibly sophisticated when it comes to managing their money. They know exactly what they're doing, making sure that they have the opportunity to achieve financial health and security as well.
Well, on that note, we're just about to hit the time for cocktail hour, and here there be dragons. Dragons are scary things if you're looking at it from this direction, but looking at it from the east, dragons are actually, good animals that, bring good things. So let's celebrate dragons, and thank you for surviving this marathon.